to put a stop to this business of allowing mortgages with 1% down or allowing adjustable rate mortgages for people. It's just too risky. What do you think would have happened? The Congress would have been up in arms because we are denying the American people their right to the American dream.
I mean, the Fed is insulated from
well,
that.
Well, no, the Fed is not. The Fed is not insulated from that when they can call up Bernanke to sit in front of them and humiliate him. No regulator wants that to happen, and so it will never be done.
The Fed is politically insulated, and what would have happened if that scenario, and that's exactly the scenario that should have occurred, is you wouldn't have had a massive wealth-killing housing bubble that has now deflated.
But there is this touching faith.
I must beg to differ on one point.
The Fed was asleep at the switch.
The moment the Fed and the Treasury arranged the Bear Stearns sale to J.P. Morgan, that unlocked Dodd-Frank bailout.
Bingo.
Greg Bowyer, you know that.
That's probably true.
We had Senator Grassley on here Friday night, and he has taken on the role of defending Main Street because of what went on with the Fed and the Treasury and Bear Stearns, and Jared is
exactly right.
Jared has a point. Going from $2 a share to $10 a share. People went, huh? I went, huh? I mean, I felt that the Bear Stearns was mishandled in terms of the discount window, but once you cross that bridge, then the repricing of this, Jared's nodding his head. I happen to agree with Jared on this point. It has raised the shackles of Main Street people. The Rasmussen polls are showing 60% are against bailouts, Greg Valliere.
There's not even an implicit quid pro quo. There's an explicit quid pro quo. You bail out Bear Stearns, you bail out Main Street.
But the thing that we probably disagree with here is that there is such a thing as too big to fail. I wish Bear Stearns and others hadn't gotten too big to fail such that we have a potential domino effect in the financial markets, but I think we do. 70%, as I understand it, 70% of borrowing in this country is now coming from non-commercial banks, and that's probably too big to fail, and that's where we are. That's the reality. Now, if we want to get off of that reality and move back to depository institutions, that's going to take a ton of regulation.
But you know what, Jerry Bowyer, here's an interesting point. You listen to all this discussion about too big to fail, and there are no failures left in the world, and the Dodd-Frank bill, I mean, look, I think that there's some good things in that bill. I think Barney Frank tried to put some incentives in there. I just don't like the principle of the thing. The reason, Jerry, the loan-to-value ratio is underwater is because there was no equity in the House in the first place. That everybody allowed this to happen. Part of this was precisely because of the Community Reinvestment Act. People had no skin in the game. And you know who got this right, Jerry Bowyer? You know who got this right? Well, Senator Obama said on Saturday, before he even read Paulson's report, that he opposed it. McCain last week had this right. He said, put skin in the game and call on personal responsibility. No bailouts of individual mistakes.
Larry,
I want to go to Jerry Bowyer first because McCain is the invisible hand here. He's the only one to get this story right.
Yeah, you know, it just so happens, I think, that the politically right answer and the economically right answer are the same answer, which is personal responsibility. Now, look, your point about the discount window, I agree, and I think the way you ought to handle that is to say to non-depository institutions, to investment banks, if you want to come to the discount window, it's voluntary. You don't have to come to the discount window, but if you want to come to the discount window, here's what you have to bring with you. Here's the information that you have to bring. Here are your capital requirements, set-asides. Now, if you don't want to participate in the discount window, investment banks, that's fine. Don't come crying to us when you have a credit crunch. Therefore, we don't have the heavy hand of the regulator. It's like a voluntary program they can participate in. And then when it happens, we don't have these waves of populism that say, well, they bailed out the big banks, so now they have to bail out everybody who took out a bad loan.
But see, here's the thing.
Can I just add one point, Larry?
Greg Valliere, Greg Valliere, I'm going to come back.
Sure.
I don't care how many bank examiners. I once worked. I was the executive assistant to the guy at the New York Fed in the mid-'70s when they closed down Marine Midland, okay? He was running bank supervision. I've seen this process up close and personal. I don't care how many bank examiners you have standing over the shoulders, you know, watching the Wall Street traders. The fact is, financial engineering, let me make that high-tech, modern financial engineering is always going to be 3 steps ahead of the examiners. That's just the reality. And we can regulate and consolidate and add more or take less out. It isn't going to change that. If risk managers make a big mistake, they ought to pay for it, Greg. To me, that is the best discipline of the marketplace.
As a rule, but at some point you get so out of whack, like you look at what's happening with commodity prices now with hedge funds rigging the markets almost. At some point, the CFTC and others have to get back to being centered. And I think that if things get a little too out of whack, there needs to be some regulation. But let's not reward the Fed, for God's sake.
But Peter Wallison, there's a sort of a lover's quarrel now. What is it? The SEC is going to be thrown in with the CFTC? What's that all about, Peter?
Well, that's been a proposal that's been around for a long time. It makes a lot of sense. There are jurisdictional difficulties between the two. It, however, will not work because in Congress, the CFTC is regulated by the agriculture committees, and the SEC is regulated by the banking and the financial services committees, and they're just not going to be able to compose those differences. But let me go back here to this question of whether anything is too big to fail. You have to remember that Drexel Burnham, which was one of the major firms on Wall Street, went down the tubes. Not a big problem. The reason why Bear was bailed out in this case was because of the fragility of the markets at this time, which is the first time in 70 years that it's happened. And some people who love regulation would like to use any reason to put new regulation into place.
Jared. That's Jared's view. Jared wants three bank examiners behind every Wall Street trader, and no one fails.
Larry, I don't even need to show up anymore. You can make my argument.
Jared, have you ever read The Constitution of Liberty by Hayek? Have you ever read Milton Friedman's Capitalism?
I wake up, I read that every morning with my coffee. Now, listen, a couple of things. First of all, the non-bank financial, the shadow financial sector is a lot bigger now than it was back in the days of Drexel Burnham.
And it's going to get bigger still.
So that's one reason. That's one reason why times are different now, and I disagree with that point of Peter's. But I want to get straight on McCain. John McCain did not say what you said he said. John McCain was asked, would you have gotten behind the Bear Stearns bailout? And he said yes. John McCain said, do we need to intervene when there is a systemic problem in the marketplace like this? And he said yes.
Meaning banking system problem.
In the
he didn't say bail anybody out. He didn't say bail anybody out. In fact, he made it very clear in the speech, and I haven't heard this from you once, Jared.
I'm telling you.
He said people should put skin in the game.
Read the next sentence.
He said the FHA, back me up on this, Greg. McCain said the